Hello, everyone. Welcome. This is Matthew Hagum, Chief Strategist for HireEffect, and I am excited to be joined today by one of our new guests for this series, Stephanie Delfonso. Stephanie, welcome. How are you today?
Thank you, Matthew. I'm great. How about you?
I am fabulous. It's beautiful. The weather's shifting. I've got my colors on. You've got your blue energy. So I think we're in a great space today. Thank you for being here. So Stephanie is a speaker, an author, and a coach, and has written the book on how you can say goodbye anxiety, hello freedom. It's all about building resilience and overcoming anxiety. And it's perfect for this month's theme, which is all about sustainability. So we're going to get into a conversation a little bit later on in our call today about how you as an entrepreneur can engage some of the techniques that Stephanie has in her back pocket or in her book to really address this issue of sustainability. But before we get into that, let me give a little bit more context. So Stephanie has spent over 20 years researching holistic, natural, and scientifically proven ways for you to break free from the invisible bounds of anxiety. But before that, Stephanie was a celebrity radio DJ, which is super cool, and ran a hypnosis practice for 10 years. So Stephanie, I want to actually start there. I would love it if you could just fill us in a little bit more about your background, add some things that maybe I missed. But ultimately, my curiosity is, how did you go from being a DJ to like ending up in this world, which is like totally different?
Right, out of necessity, actually.
Got it.
Because in my mid-30s, so, a little over 20 years ago, I had my infamous Cheetos moment, which I share about in the book. And it was literally me losing my beep on a bag of Cheetos, smashing it into smithereens. And it was because my last radio DJ job was doing the morning show. And I developed debilitating insomnia. And so I did what most people do. I went to the doctor and I got a prescription and it worked for a short time, and then it stopped. And now, that just made it 1,000 times worse. I was freaking out because now it wasn't just all the what ifs that are a hallmark of anxiety, but now it was, what if I take the pill and it doesn't work? Oh my gosh, what if I take the pill and it doesn't work and then I don't sleep? And blah, 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 blah. So I realized that the medication was just a Band-Aid, that I needed to find out, what's under this. And I didn't realize, I'm in my mid-30s at this point, and I didn't realize I had struggled with anxiety my whole life because it was just what I knew. I didn't know any other way to be. And so I started researching, and this was in the mid-90s. We didn't have Google. The internet was, in its infancy. So I was going old school. I would go to the library and check out books and magazines and cassette tapes, which people, don't even know what they are anymore. But that's where I started trying to do the research, because it was like, all right, if the medication isn't helping me, and I honestly didn't know that insomnia and anxiety are like close cousins. So I started doing the research for me, and then, life went on. Here I learned about emotional freedom techniques, or a lot of people know it as tapping. So that was when Gary Craig was first rolling it out in the mid-90s, when I'm on a teleclass with my corded to the wall telephone, listening to Gary Craig talking about this tapping, which is like acupuncture without needles. And now I'm not doing my radio show anymore. So I'm a stay-at-home mom, and I'm telling people about this technique, and they're like, okay, and backing up. So as I learned more and more different techniques, I went into my first day of hypnosis training, and I was just like, oh my gosh, this is what I've been called to do. Because you can make change like that. Like, really, change can happen so quickly. So I've taken, and the whole thing about me writing the book on anxiety is it was out of necessity. So I'm not sitting back as the expert and saying, oh, let me tell you about anxiety. It's like, hi, I went from to, oh, my kids came home a couple of years ago and said, hey, did you start smoking weed? Because I have become so chill. And it's not that I don't ever experience anxiety. I don't tell people you'll never experience anxiety, but I'm prepared. I know, first of all, I do my daily practices, which, you know, we'll talk about, that it's important. You've got to do your daily practices each and every day. Just like hopefully everybody can raise their hand and say, yes, I brush my teeth twice a day, every day. We're doing that to prevent the buildup of plaque and tartar, which lead to cavities. So by doing these simple techniques on a daily basis, we are preventing the buildup of the stress and anxiety into panic attacks and overwhelm. So it's about understanding that you can't control what's going on around you. You know, stuff that's going on in the world, it's going to happen. It's how we choose. Do we respond or do we react?
Yeah, that makes sense. And I want to highlight something that you brought up because I think it's valuable. And it's around this idea of responding or reacting. And you know, you think about, I mean, you brought up technology earlier, and I just think about the fact that, you know, I see people who are, you know, paying attention, whatever that is, right? And then all of a sudden their phone rings, or they get the ding, you know, you've got an email, you got a text, or whatever the thing is. And it's like fascinating to me how hard it is for people to not be reactive to this technology, you know, this instant access to information and this instant pinging that happens in our lives. And it's important, I think, to highlight, because even that causes stress, right? It's like a whole other layer of stress that maybe, I don't know, I'm assuming, but assuming that generations before us didn't have to hear the ding of the cell phone for the text message. And now all of a sudden that thing that you could have been told yesterday is actually the most important thing in your life and needs to be dealt with right now.
Right.
So it's interesting how that's played a role.
Well, let me take that a little bit farther, because this was really fascinating. I was at a conference a year and a half ago, and I got to hear Tony Fadell, who was the inventor of the iPod, and he helped on the first 3 generations of the iPhone. And he talked about the addictive nature and that it's intentional. All those notifications, it's intentionally addictive, because you get that notification and you get a dopamine hit. And what happens when you get a dopamine hit? You want another one and another one. And so in this conference, this Mindfulness in America conference, where it was bringing together, well, leaders from the wisdom community and leaders from the tech industry. And I was like, wow, I have an incredibly different relationship with my phone than anybody in this whole hall. I'm in the hall, you know, this big hall with, you know, probably at least 1,000 people. My phone is almost always turned off, but the one sound it makes is a little Zen bell chime if somebody's actually calling to have a phone conversation with me.
A real phone conversation.
I don't have any of those notifications. And he talked about this. You know what this is mimicking? It's mimicking the arm on the slot machine. And it's intentional. They are, you know, they put together this technology in a way designed to intentionally addict you. So you know, most people don't know this. And so it's just like, yeah, okay, oh, let me. And so I invite clients, I'll say, and I always say, oh, I extend invitations. I don't tell people what to do. For the next 7 days, turn your notifications off. Oh, I don't know if I could do that. All right. Can you try it for 3? And that would be anybody who's watching this. I'd really invite you to, for 3 days, turn your notifications off and notice. At first, it's going to raise your stress. I guarantee you, like, you know, because it's like going through a withdrawal. But after 3 days, then maybe look and go, was I a little more present? Sorry, my dog's shaking back here. You know, was I a little more present? Was I a little calmer? Was I able to, instead of jumping onto my phone, maybe just stopping and taking a breath?
Yeah. I like that. And it reminds me of something else that you've talked about before, which is that what if loop, which we'll get to in a moment. But I want to go back to something you said earlier, just about your morning practice or your daily practice. Can you just tell us a little bit about what you actually do to bring yourself into the day and to kind of get yourself present with?
So the first thing for me is always gratitude. Always starting the day in gratitude, because when we focus, where your attention goes is where your focus goes. So when we start the day in gratitude, and I come up with at least 3 things or more that to say I'm grateful for before my feet hit the floor, because then when I'm starting the day in gratitude, I'm already raising my vibration. Instead of, as entrepreneurs, we can get up and start into that what if loop, and oh my God, I've got to, bah, 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 bah. And then
ding, 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 go. Yeah.
Right. The day's just going to spiral out of your control. But so when you start with the day in gratitude, and then I would also say, and this is an area I really have to watch myself with, is to start the day not jumping on the phone immediately. I remember seeing Marianne Williamson years ago in person, and she said, you'll understand why it was years ago. She said, we wake up in the morning, we turn the TV news on, we grab our coffee, we go out and pick up the newspaper from the driveway. That tells you how long ago it was. And then we wonder why we have a shitty day.
Yeah.
And so now we wake up, we go online to find out all this horrible news because they're not sharing happy news, right?
Yeah.
And then, so if you can start your day in gratitude, and I don't tell people, oh, you've got to meditate for 20 minutes, because our attention spans won't go that long in this technological age. But if you could start your day with gratitude, and then even just a few minutes, 3 to 5 minutes of, whether you call it meditation or mindfulness, but just 3 minutes of getting yourself grounded and centered. Again, anybody who's watching this, just try it for 3 days and see what a difference it makes.
Word. Yeah. And you'll find that it will make a difference.
Yeah.
To be fair. I mean, I've done this before. It definitely works. So let's go back to the what if loop for a moment here, but let's actually start to talk a little bit about some techniques. I know that we have a giveaway for those of you who are tuning in, which we'll share a little bit more about later, but we have a couple of techniques that Stephanie utilizes to kind of help people get centered, get focused, get clear. And I want to sort of tie that out with this conversation on the what if loop. So do you want to just share a little bit about what maybe some of these techniques are, and then introduce us to a few of them?
They're so incredibly simple, and they are profoundly simple and simply profound, because if I say, all right, you want to overcome anxiety, meditate 20 minutes in the morning, 20 minutes at night, you're out of here. If I say, oh, if you're feeling anxious, toss a tennis ball back and forth. Like, most people don't have a tennis ball, with them. So great. You don't have a tennis ball? Use a water bottle. You don't have anything that you can toss back and forth? Use your hands. And the reason this works, this is crossing the midline. We're crossing the midline of the body. We're crossing the midline of the brain. So we're balancing both sides of the brain, and it will take the edge off. It's not like you wait until you're in a panic attack and then you do this and all of a sudden you're going to be like a Zen monk. It doesn't work that way. But when you can
Why not?
Just the way we're wired.
Yeah, no.
But, how simple is this? We're just doing this. When my son was graduating from high school, I was really anxious that day. And so I went early. I wanted to make sure I got a great seat. So I went early, and I'm sitting on the metal bleachers of the football field. And I didn't bring a tennis ball. No, I brought his lacrosse ball, which is a really heavy, thick rubber ball. And so I'm doing this, and I drop it, and thud, thud, thud down the metal bleachers. I go down, I pick it up, I go back up, I do it again, thud, thud, thud down the metal bleachers. So I wouldn't recommend, like something like a lacrosse ball.
Yeah.
But again, if you can just do this and take the edge off, how simple is that? These techniques, I've got 35 of them in the book. And it's because if you think about in this water bottle, I don't know if you can see that water's up to here. So if you think about that as good, calm energy, there's only a little bit of room for the stress and anxious energy. And if you think of it the other way, if this was all stress and anxious energy, and there's only a little bit of room for the good, then if you start pouring out, emptying out that accumulating stress and anxious energy, then there's more room for what you want.
Word. So what's the second technique? I know you've got another one up here. Are you tired?
No, and I'm not bored either. It's literally, it's to just yawn. And like, I'll see my clients and they're trying to stifle it, right? There you go. So, and I'm always like, no, let it out, let it out. Because what happens when we yawn, whether it's involuntary or on purpose, when we yawn, we stimulate the vagus nerve, which is the longest nerve in our body. It runs from our brain all the way down to our abdomen and encircles all of our internal organs. And we're stimulating the parasympathetic or rest and digest nervous system. So you can yawn anytime, anywhere. If you're in a meeting, if you're like pitching a client, you might not want to be yawning, send the wrong message. But, just about anywhere, you can be like, oh, people will think you had a late night. They're not going to say, what are you doing? Right? So it's these simple techniques that you can weave in on a regular basis so that when you're pitching a big client and you've got some nerves, you've been building up these healthy new habits. And so when you get a little more anxious, you've already got it in place. Excuse me.
Cool. Yeah, thanks for sharing that. So again, our giveaway to our audience listening in today is this taste of the book, right? The 5 easy ways for them to break through some of these anxiety challenges that they have, again, so that they can get back to a place of being grounded and centered so that they can do their great work in the world, which is to create businesses and create jobs and provide amazing services to the world around them. Now, so thank you for sharing those tips. Now, before we close out, I want to talk about one more thing that you actually brought up in our pre-interview, and it was this idea of accountability. And I think it was the quote from Stephen Kelly. You said accountability breeds responsibility.
Yeah, responsibility. Not responsibility the way that we've always thought of it, but responsibility. So I would highly recommend that anybody who's watching this that wants to start breaking free, wants to find more balance and center, which will inspire your bottom line. Like I have continuously seen, people will come and work with me. And then I've got one of the quotes on my website is, I worked with this woman who was the breadwinner for her family. And within like a month, she booked $20,000 worth of new business. And it was just by making these simple shifts. So I would invite anybody who's watching this, who goes ahead and, gets the download, because it's 5 of the 35 techniques straight from my book. So it's bite size, it's manageable. All right, I can do that. And find somebody to watch this with, or just say, hey, I want to start doing these with. Find an accountability partner, buddy up for at least the next 7 days and check in with each other, because there's been so many research studies that show when we are accountable to somebody else, we are much more likely to succeed at whatever that goal is.
Yeah, absolutely. I totally agree with you, because I've experienced, I'm in an accountability group right now, and having that commitment, in this case daily, it's actually a daily commitment, to check in with my team and tell them what I'm working on, tell them what my goals are, and then to close out every day. And if I don't show up the next day having done that, then I have the responsibility to then talk to them about it and have that breakdown and go through that experience. So it's just the power of having accountability in place can create great change quite rapidly, actually. So that's
and as entrepreneurs, a lot of times we're existing in a vacuum. And so if I make a commitment to myself, I'm gonna do these techniques, for the next 7 days. If I don't, it's like, oh, I screwed up again. Next. And when it's like, oh, I've got to check in with Matthew and say, you know what, I lost my over something today. And Matthew says, well, did you do any of the techniques? No.
Got it. Yeah, right. Sometimes it's the obvious question that you need to ask yourself that someone else will kindly ask for you.
Right. Kindly
ask for you. I appreciate that. Well, thank you very much, Stephanie, for coming together. Is there any last tidbit of advice or a closing comment that you want to make before we end our interview this afternoon?
Thanks for asking. That's really great, because what the one little nugget I would share is just start wherever you are. You don't have to, I want to get to, just start. Just start doing this several times a day,
Mm-hmm.
or yawning several times a day. And you'll notice in a couple of days, you'll notice, oh, things are a little different. Things are a little better.
Word. Thank you, Stephanie. I appreciate that. So for
Thank
those
you.
of you tuning in, thank you again for joining us. We're going to drop all of the important links in either the comments section or the description section, depending on which social media platform you're on. Again, don't forget to check out the 5 easy tips, the resource PDF that Stephanie has provided us. Also, keep your eye out for her book, Goodbye Anxiety, Hello Freedom. It's such a powerful, important topic for entrepreneurs who are looking to unpack anxiety and understand ultimately how to live a more sustainable lifestyle. So thank you again, Stephanie, for being here. All right.
Thanks, Matthew.
Thank you. Bye-bye.